episode 10 of Matire Gemi, a bi-weekly podcast where we help you learn about your Agîkûyû culture, history, and heritage in English and in a fun, light-hearted way. I'm Njeri Diho, your anchor, and I'm here with Waiyaki Wageshaga, your cultural enthusiast who continues to immerse himself in learning the ways of our ancestors. In this episode, we cover the final stages of the life of a Mugikuyu, starting with marriage, all the way to the final stage, which was death before transition into the afterlife. And let me tell you this. You will be in awe around what we learned and what we did as a society. You will be in awe when you realize that our values threaded through the life of every single Mugikuyu in a very intentional way. And you will realize that there was no randomness in our culture and that every single stage was powerful and important, and it brought balance to our society as the Agîkûyû. So let's jump in.
I think this one deserves its own
topic,
entire podcast.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah. Let me add one more. Let me add one more thing. To add to what Ciku said. So when they introduced the hard tax, then you can't have many structures in a homestead. You have to have one.
Yes.
So you destroy what is called the Digira. And you know what Digira stands for?
Yes.
Digira comes from the word Wodiga, which is to protect.
Or to protect.
Or to block, protect.
Yes.
So the Digira, which was the protector of the home, got destroyed because if you have a Digira and you have even one wife who has a nyoba, you're forced to move into her house so that you don't pay her tax. Mm-hmm. So it really disrupted our ways of life completely.
No wonder nowadays you hear women say, I don't need a man.
And
and the reality
and if
is
I may add to that,
all do.
If I may add,
men need women and women need men. Go ahead, King'ori.
If I may add to the Gira, I mean, just it was a very important institution in itself. The word Ozigu, is what we may call today righteousness, if we had to use a word. And it was one of those things that men championed. Is uprightness champion, that righteousness. And the Gira is where the instructions went on for what exactly it was to be a particular way. The reason why we made a decision earlier on in this podcast that we wouldn't get into too many details around matters that would be seen as uncouth to discuss in public has also a lot to do with the Ga. That idea that you have to be upright in a particular way. It is a Kikuyu trait that you don't say things, blurt them out. You have to use decorum and the right way to say things so that it's not offensive. For example, you won't hear a Mugikuyu say that they just went to pee, or went number 2 or whatever. You will always hear it in such in a manner that, first of all, you might not even know what they're talking about. Because number 1 was, go to amata, which means I've gone to spit, right? And you would wonder, well, okay, why is that a big deal? Why do you have to announce that you're about to go spit, And even that wasn't meant to mean that. It was meant to mean bless. Because that's what they meant, because what to amata is to bless. And also, and then if you're going to number 2, you would say, I've gone for a period. I've gone for a while. A while. I'm gone for a while. And so this is, if you understand Mugikuyu as someone who doesn't want to be uncouth, Ozigu, that is Ozigu, that's what we say. And it's beyond just righteousness as in spiritually. It's also, in their appearance and in their behavior.
Oh, so beautiful. We were so classy. I mean, for real.
we were.
Go ahead, Ciku.
And even if I can add in this classiness, right? So we also recognize the power of words, right? Of speaking. And along with that, we also understood the power of being clean, right? So not just being physically clean, but also being spiritually clean. That's why we had so many rituals that go along with cleanliness, right? So it's not just physical cleanliness, even though we are a very clean people, right? We always had water. We always made sure that there was water, but also in our thoughts, in the way that we speak. Like this whole theme of being pure, lack of a better word, is central throughout our life. And the places in which we live. You know what I mean? Like even in the compound, it's extremely important that there's nothing in the compound. There's no leaves. It's always swept, So if somebody trips, like that's something bad. Nobody should ever trip. So this concept of cleanliness is also an important one. Also, I might add, I forgot to put this to mention this, but women also worked with a plant that was considered extremely feminine, which is castor oil, right? So castor oil was used to I'm going to use the word adorn our body, because it was more than just putting it. Like it was an entire ritual of how you're going to apply it, an entire ritual, how you harvest it, how you burn it, how you dry it, how you cook it, who can cook it, So, and this just really highlights that in our lives, there were so many aspects of ways that we were expressing ourselves, right? And the concept of downtime meaning when you're not in the field or when you're not herding the cows, is time that we use to exercise other aspects of who we are. You know what I mean? Which is important and helps to revive and allows for a vibrant community.
Yeah, I'll say castor oil was used also in circumcision. They call it magutama bareki. That's the Kikuyu term for castor oil.
Okay, now that we've gone through this amazing stage, right, and we're so full of pride of our people, our culture, our heritage, what's the next step? What's the next stage in this cycle?
Yeah, so I think we've moved on from now let's get into the Modhuri and Motumia stage. This is now when, obviously the details of marriage and the kirera for marriage is very interesting, and we've had a lot of our listeners wanting to learn more about it. There's confusion on what are the stages, what is Rurashio and all that, which we'll talk about in another podcast. But now let's focus on the stage of a married woman and a married man. And we can go from there. I don't know who wants to take on that specific stage where the man is a Modhuri before he becomes a Modhuri wa Kiama, and then the woman is Karageire or Kangei, right?
Yeah, let's have King'ori go fast, because the last couple we had Ciku go fast. So let's do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, sure. So once you've gone through your young man warrior stage, which is Mwanake, you now have settled down, you have a wife, and you have some children. This is actually the part of stage of your life that people actually called you Modo Mogima. And it's interesting because this is what we know today as just adult. But this is it. This is Modo Mogima. Another word was Kamatimo. Another one was Karavai. And this is a young man who's married, who has some children, and is still in the warrior class, but is more like a veteran, But he's a warrior class. He rarely is, too concerned with what's going on with those regiments, but he can be called upon. He's like a reservist. He can be called upon to go to battle if needed, but he's not on active duty, And now he's being allowed now to focus more on his family and that upbringing. His wife is at this age called Kangei. Kangei has those small kids running around. Also, I don't know why they were called this, but they would be called Mohikiwaro Wararo Mwe, which directly translates to a bride of I don't know, one fingernail or something like that. I don't know why they called it that. But these were people who were now just in that building stage of family life, and they were busy. These are the guys these are the real workhorses of society. Really, they're that center core, and they're not kids anymore, but they're certainly now being seen as people who have matured and who are now at the center stage of many things. So that's who we have there at that particular stage. It's about childbearing. It's about learning still. If it's a young man, he's really now concerned about what people are, how people look at him, what his name, what kind of name he's building for himself. They're very concerned about that. They're upward thinking. They're both thinking, wow, how are we emerging in the community? How are we seen?
Our brand.
And they're building that name for themselves. Exactly. They're brand building. There you go. Yeah. So that's what that stage is. And that's Kangei and Kamatimo. That would be that couple. Yeah.
Yes. And for the women around in this stage, it's about, yes, now you are giving birth to your children. You are having your age mates who are now giving birth to their children. There's a lot to learn now when you are an actual mother, how to care for your newborn, right? So in using certain herbs to be able to help bathe your child, in using castor oil, there's I'm going to call it a ritual that's done to help massage a child, right? After the child is born. Older women will come in, and now you're helping these young brides. How do I do that, right? So now you're being taught how to be able to do this massage on infants, You're going and you're seeing your age mates who have just given birth. After you give birth, there's certain food that you eat. There's certain food that you eat up to a year after the child has been born. So your age mates are bringing you this food. So around that time, for the women, it's an extremely feminine experience, right? The estrogen levels are extremely high around this time, because your age mates are giving birth. Older women are helping you to be able to be this new mother. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And something else that you just mentioned there is, and that I would like to, I think is important, is while they're having these children, remember what's starting to happen now is that they're starting to be the forefront of the rituals, right? So this is the first time your baby is being born again. And this is probably the first time you really understand what it means.
Yes.
And you're starting to be deeper in spirituality. Remember, for Mugikuyu, life does not begin with birth. Life begins before conception, right?
Yes.
There's this understanding that the spirit existed. And so you've ushered a spirit into the world. You're seeing yourself differently if you're a mother now. You're seeing yourself as, wow, I'm this important portal and vessel for life. And here's this baby. And those who had the misfortune of losing a child, for example, would now learn a new lesson, that if a child like that were to pass away and you were to get pregnant again, guess what? Everybody's telling you that, oh, no, it's the same child that's coming through again. And so this new child, you could name them something like Karioki, Morioki, Moshoki. Those names meant that that child has returned. So it's a very sobering time. You're at the front seat of really understanding at depth what life is about. It's a very enriching time. You've kind of relaxed on some of your, other energy things you were doing before when you were a young person, but you're also not exempt from them. You are encouraged to join those dances, and especially that particular dance that happened after circumcision, for example. That particular dance, it was very interesting, because when these young men left their seclusion, and they were coming around and they were acting with a lot of male testosterone oozing out of them, and they're behaving in a certain way. They were allowed to dance with women that were at this particular age of Kang'ei, and it would be something that these women were like, "Ooh, I need to remind myself of my younger days." They were allowed. They were allowed to do that. They were allowed to intermingle with them. But of course, like with everything else, it observed balance. It was an interesting time for both, and I think the main thing here it's sobering and it's time to really work. That's really what it's about.
And build your family, right? So you can start to see that, like you said before, the men are taking on reservist roles so that you can focus on the family. The women are focused on building their children, developing them. So there seems to be a very strong focus on building your family, which is great. Wonderful.
Exactly.
And building your ireri, as we've defined it before, as your legacy or your gumo, what people know you for.
Right.
And as we continue discussing the stages, we also have to say that every stage that you passed or graduated, like King'ori, we were talking about this a few days ago, it's when you graduated from one stage to another, the people who are below you are able to respect you, both men and women. If you became a father or a mother, you had graduated from just being a moiretu or moanake. You earned the respect of being called Idawa or Ninawa, and that respect level kept going on as the person grew older and became wiser and graduated through those stages.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because, we defined children as wealth, right? Children are one definition of the 5 definitions of wealth. But it was interesting that also we had the practice of adoption, right? It's not a Western philosophy. Yeah. I think I told the story on podcast number 1 on Gashie and how he was barren and he had the opportunity to actually adopt, right? A lot of children. I have no idea how the whole process worked, but there was also that option, right? Is that if you couldn't, you could also step into that role through adoption. Build your family that way.
There's a Kikuyu saying that Jogoma Jega. Who can finish that one for me? There's Jogoma. Thank you very much. Yes, there you go. And he nailed it.
I mean, it's
so we have it's a saying that is a paradox. So Jogoma Jega. Some will say Yumaga Ikorero. And that means that Jogoma is a club, right? So it is a war club. And a war club is taken out of a tree from a very specific type of joint. So where the stem and the branch connect, the place you'll be holding will be kind of like the branch, and the business end will come out of the stem where it disconnects, where it connects to the branch. So the way they extracted that jogoma when they were harvesting it is what we're calling ikorero. Okora is to harvest it or to extract it. So that's the first part of that saying, jogoma jega yumaga ikorero, that a good club is determined by how you extract it from the tree. So that's one of the sayings. The other part of that saying actually says, it's not necessarily that. It is jogoma jega yumaga ikorero, meaning how that tree grew is what's important. And why this particular saying is very important in framing our discussion right now is because there is a big debate. This is the nature versus nurture debate, right? In philosophy. Mugikuyu had that debate. And even today, it's not settled. So what's more important, the nature of the individual or the way that person was nurtured, right? And so here we have upbringing obviously being very important, right? The upbringing is important, and this is the nature of the individual. And then we have how that individual is being prepared for the next stage and what they're learning. And that's the nurture part of it. And so in all these stages, and there are 9 stages, and therefore that means there are 7 intermissions between them. All these are opportunities to prepare the individual and nurture them to be the best. So maybe they weren't nurtured very well in the first 3 phases. You still have another shot at making sure that that individual becomes the right type of person you're looking for in the society. So when you're talking about the Kang'ei, now this stage, is the first time you're going to really see how are we doing. It's, this stage of life is a good one to see. How are we doing? How have we done? What kind of individuals do we have in the society? This is like you're in the middle part of your existence, and so how well have you been tutored? And that means your bringing, and how well have we ushered you into these stages? Now is very clear, and a lot of the people are now cresting. Honestly, they're getting to who they really are, and it's becoming very visible.
Wonderful. Okay, so then we move on to the next stage. What was that, Waiyaki?
So this is when the man got into the Kiama. So they become a Mudhuri wa Kiama. And I think it's just more of a graduation from just being a Karavai to being able to be admitted into the Kiama. And if I can define what Kiama is, it's like a group of truth. And I don't know if King'ori, I'm wrong there, because me, I'm not a Mudhuri wa Kiama, but Kiama, if you see a lot of interesting Kikuyu words or important Kikuyu words contain the word ma. So when you hear about Kiama is truth, care of truth. So this is where the Mudhuri enters that stage. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the Kiama is actually the Council of Elders. That is what it is. It is a judicial authority. So the Kikuyus were ruled by a Council of Elders, and this was what they called Kiama.
Not a chief, right?
So they called them not a chief. And by the way, I know there's a lot of debate about Mudamaki, what it means, and that's what truth is, we call a chief or something like that, or a king. They existed, by the way, but that's a debate for another. But in quintessential Agîkûyû, there are no chiefs. They can occur, but it's the Council of Elders where the power really lies. That's where it lies. So the Kiama is the Council of Truth, is really what they call themselves in a direct translation. And Waiyaki is right. This is a stage where this individual kind of becomes allowed to step in. They're not there yet, but they have joined the first ring of the council, and they're allowed to be in the sittings and what have you. This man's wife is called Karegeide, and both of them have now had their first son circumcised, or the children are of the age where their peers have been circumcised. That's what would mark that stage beginning. Maybe Ciku, you can tell us a little bit about this woman.
So yes, so this stage for a woman, excuse me, is where she begins to really assert her economic power. Around this time, especially when her daughter has been circumcised, now she can leave her home for an extended amount of time to go trade. And Kikuyu women were known to go as far off as Mombasa. So when I say trade, it's not just, she went to the market, she'll be back at noon, right? Like it's trading and traveling far off places. This woman at this stage, so in trading now, her economic power increases because she then now is able to use her supplies that have been in the granary, right, to be able to trade to get beads, all of this, which now she can be able to trade now with other ethnic groups that's around there, with other villages, and this economic power ends up yielding a lot of economic wealth for the larger family, because now her husband can now also be able to get more wives, can now be able to get more land. And by this, I mean, because now he has more resources, right? And also, at this stage for a woman, if she chose so, she, because now she has economic power, can now be able to assert a right that women had in how she wants to exercise her marriage. And by that, I mean, whether she wants to now entertain marrying another woman. And this is something that I don't want to say it's controversial, but it is within a Kikuyu context. So it has nothing absolutely to do with sexuality, right? It has to do with now this woman can be able to continue to name her family. You know what I mean? And in her naming her family, the wealth of her family now is increasing, right? So women in this particular stage, and I also want to clarify, in this stage, there was many levels, right? So a 40-year-old is not going to be the same as a 50-year-old, even though they're all in the same age group, right? But within this general age group, the women could be able to assert, like I said, a lot of their economic power, might.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is so beautiful. And something else I read is so powerful about economic power. But something else I read is, we hear a lot about, and correct me, guys, we hear a lot about the kiama, like council of elders that is very masculine, right? The question becomes, did women also have, those kind of rights? And I did read from that same article, research paper, it's like over 200 pages long. It's really fantastic. Is that even women had leadership councils. It's not talked about a lot,
yes,
right? And those leadership, so men entered their leadership councils and so did women. They earned it, right?
Yes.
And those leadership councils of women would act independently of men because they would make decisions about women, if that makes any sense. There would be the decisions around women. They had a lot of power around production and distribution of food, etc. Versus the male council of elders made decisions about both men and women. And what was interesting is in those councils, they talked about the fact that men from these councils, once they made decisions, they had to start, you guys talked about this, negotiating with certain women in these councils to get their buy-in on whatever they needed to, for example, exercise for the whole community, right? So it's really powerful, interesting to see the balance and the fact that both played a leadership role in the community.
Yes, and even if...
Yes, I was going to say that we were very democratic in that way. I mean, even the young men had their own councils. So there was a council for young men, a council for women, and a council for men. What happened is that the council for men was actually was seen as a high court. Like that's where you referred issues. But also there were even family councils. So that within a family, a man and a woman would sit and listen to the problems within there. And the man in that case would be the authority that would be the tiebreaker on an issue. All councils had a tiebreaker if you couldn't make a decision. And so within a family structure, it was a man. Within an extended family, there would be somebody called Moramati, who is usually the eldest cousin. And that person could also play that role of being a tiebreaker. And even within an entire moherega, you might have issues that have to do with the moherega, and they would sit their own councils and debate their own matters. So it's only when you needed to take a case to a higher court that it would now come to the council of elders, where men would sit and actually debate something that was more general, affecting everyone else.
The big issues, right?
Yeah.
The bigger, yeah.
And something that we talked about before, and I think it's good to highlight now, is that when you have the male stages and you have the female stages, at each, well, not at each, it's being able to hold a secret is something that is very, very important to Kikuyu culture, right? Because these secrets, the men's secrets, have to do with how they're going to protect and all of that having to do with male activities, right? The women's councils and women's secrets have to do with how they're going to nurture the spaces in which women occupy, right? Now we can see how there's intersections of this, right? So now within a homestead, when there's an issue, how can we resolve the issue? There's a structure in which how you would resolve that issue, right? Then now if the issue becomes larger and larger. So our culture is one where there's so many places of intersection, and I don't want that to be missed, because it highlights just how complex our societies were. Because oftentimes we're just regarded as if we were doing random things at random, right? But I wanted to be very clear that it was absolutely not random, right? The reason why the Mau Mau to this day, none of them have ever spoken, is because they took a vow, right? And that vow that they took was something that they knew was not just having to do with who you are now. It's your spirit that also took that, right? So the consequences are not just what could happen on this plane on Earth. It's the consequences that could happen in other realms, right? And in the councils, in the various gender roles, we also get to know more and more spiritual laws, lack of a better word, or consequences to our actions. Yeah.
That was really good, Ciku. I'll say one more thing about the democracy, and I don't want to get into politics, but sometimes you find, politics, the Western democratic ideals, when they're imported from the West, don't work because, like, if you look at the Agîkûyû society, a good friend of mine who I just met called Mushiri told me that in Africa, most of the kingdoms were kingdoms. There was a king. But only when you come to the Agîkûyû do they have, and maybe other tribes, but Agîkûyû particularly, they didn't make decisions based on a king or a mudamaki. They made decisions based on consensus from a council of elders, people who had graduated and earned their place in the council of elders, which was very unique from other, tribes or other regions in Africa which had kings.
Which is so powerful because it goes back to justice, it goes to equity, it goes to good decision making. It just really goes to the beautiful complexity of our culture, which cannot be reduced to what it has been reduced to today, right? And I think that is so beautiful. So thank you for all those perspectives, guys. So I think now we're going to the final stage, are we?
Yeah, I'm guessing
Not yet.
it's the
Not yet. Okay, what's this stage now?
I think we're in the final two stages or so.
Okay.
King'ori, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so in that last stage, something new has happened to the man that hasn't happened to the woman yet, and that is now he can partake of alcohol in social gatherings. And in one of the podcasts, you guys were talking about alcohol and Muratina particularly and what it all meant. So this was a really powerful thing that has happened for this man who is still at that stage of, Kiabikeogodo or Muduru Adegwa. Now, the next stage is now when, people can be readily seen as elders. And that's when a woman is called Nyakenyuanini. And at this point, she has, all her children, or if she has boys, all her boys have been initiated. And now she can actually, she's allowed to drink alcohol in social gatherings. And not only that, she's now starting to be given a lot of respect in the community. She's seen as someone who's seen it all. She's gone through most cycles and understands a lot, and really has an elder status. And her husband is called Mururiwa Horio. And this is the individual who now is a full member of the Kiama. Now remember, when we talk about Kiama, things about Kiama were not compulsory. Not every man joined the Kiama. In fact, not every man could join the Kiama. It had a lot to do with your pedigree. You had to be observed for a very long time while you were in that interim status before, when you were Modoriwa Degwa, you had to be observed. And, before you partook of council issues.
The cream of the crop only, the best of the best.
Yeah, yes,
Love it.
Right, exactly. And this is, you won't find a lot of information about what happens here because this is where the secrecy really kicks in about Kiama and what people do there and what have you. But we know that it's a matter. These are issues of bringing justice to the community. This is the main point that's happening here. And so in the Horio, that individual, if you look at them from outside, Moduriwa Horio is very respectable. That individual is walking around with a staff. Now they're not carrying a spear. They're not carrying jogoma. They're carrying a staff. And this staff is a sign of authority. And they're walking around, and if there's any issue in the community, people are quick to bring the issue to them. I mean, if there's such a man were to walk up to some young men and who are fighting, just one word of stop was enough. There was they would stop when they would realize that this was a Modulu or you were speaking. They would stop. There was such reverence to this individual. That same reverence could be felt with his wife, Nyakenyua. Any Nyakenyua was such an important person. That word did not just come out easily. It was a very important individual. So there was Nyakenyua Nini, who was likely to still be of child-rearing age, right? Even though she has children who have been initiated, and a good number of them, probably all of them in this case, but she's not menopausal yet, typically. And she's now partaking of alcohol. She can actually share the alcohol she's serving. And then the next stage, and I don't know if you want me to go to the next stage, but because they're related, is when she goes to be, she's now termed as Nyakenyua Goro. And Nyakenyua Goro now is often postmenopausal, but still very energetic. This Nyakenyua Goro had a lot of power in the community. She was wielding a lot of authority. She can, even beyond her family, be seen distributing the alcohol in these important ceremonies. And that meant a lot for those who understand. Maybe one day we'll talk about that, what that all means. But it's it's very prestigious and a huge burden that's been put on them to learn how to share these things out. There's a saying that says "Mokoro raya oto mogaire," as in elder woman, teach us how to share things out equally and share things out particularly because it is the elder women that passed things out. They're the ones that shared things around. They're the ones who were seen as the ones who can think about everyone and consider who needs what, when, and where. Mm-hmm. And so you were really well regarded as Nyakenyua Goro, and your word was very sought after. So that's, and of course, Moduru, her husband is Moduru Amatari, and that's an even higher grade of an elder. And they call, in some people will refer to that as a Modamaki. If you've ever heard them saying there was a Modamaki that was crowned in such a place, we've seen those happening lately. That's what that is. It is another level. It's an executive leadership sort of responsibility, and this is what people most of the time used to confuse for a chief or whatever. And sometimes they did become. Okay. Yeah. So it's another level of leadership. So from there, I think Nyakenyua Goro and Muduri wa Matavi, that level is usually, your grandpa. And very, very well respected. They don't have to repeat anything twice. Often, if they're going to be wealthy, they're extremely wealthy. In fact, there was a particular type of a Mozamaki who would be so wealthy that they used to wear these ornaments in his hands called gome, right? And gome used to prevent the guy from even working. As in, the guy just, he doesn't work. He designates things and delegates things, and people, he's sought after for knowledge. And this often, this individual would have multiple wives, many children, would have hundreds in flock, would have many, many acres, dozens of acres under cultivation. His family's home was seen to be flowing with milk and honey. He was seen to be oozing, wisdom. And so people used to come to him constantly. His job now became a consultant. This is all he did. And that's why he never actually worked, and therefore had to put those ornaments in his hands as a symbol of someone who doesn't work. And he would always be meticulously dressed with the best. Is like a coat, if you were to use that term. Cloak, that's what he would be wearing. And so these two were very prestigious individuals at that stage of their lives, and everyone looked up to them, and they were powerful.
Yeah, they stepped into, in modern terms, executive leadership, right? Where they get guidance, consulting. They didn't do the work, but they were the ones that showed us where to go, how to go, because they had all the wisdom, behind them to do this. I love that. So anything to add, Ciku?
Yes, and actually, I misspoke. I said that the women in the previous age set that we were discussing, that they could marry other women. I misspoke. It is in this age set. It is in Nyakinwanini. So I misspoke. I also want to, excuse me. I also want to add that for the women that are in the Nyakinwa Guru, it is considered a high honor even to be in this stage, right? Because age, it means that you have lived and you have seen a lot, right? So there is a certain reverence that even comes along with, you are still here and you must have seen so much. You have seen so many seasons. You have seen so much. So for somebody to reach this particular stage, I just want to emphasize that the honor also came with that you have reached this stage in life. So you are so revered. For women, there is certain power that comes with your reproduction, with your ability to create life. There is also a certain power that comes when you are no longer able to do that, right? And when a woman reaches this stage, it is also considered a high honor. Yeah. For that reason, excuse me.
Beautiful. Great. All right. Thank you for that, guys. So then what's the next and final stage, I'm thinking?
Yeah, we're really at the closing of the stages. So for the man, it's Mudhuri wa Maturaguru, and for the woman is the Keheti. So this is now, once you graduate from that executive leadership to where you're really old, you don't really leave your house, or you don't leave your compound, where you're really, really, really old. And Kikuyus used to age and live up to 120, 130. We've had a great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers used to live for very long, and used to decide when they were going to pass, is what I've heard. So I don't know anything to add on to this stage, King'ori and Shiko?
Yeah, if I can just bring something up, which is interesting, and you guys can add to it. But one of the things that's so beautiful is that even when someone reached that stage, based on the last podcast, right, your body may have been weak, but your mind was still sharp and clear. So it's not that you are not a valuable member. So nowadays, when we think of aging, your body and your mind is weak, right? Because of the food we eat, the environment, and everything. But their bodies may have been weak because that's natural, but their minds were sharp and clear, and they still contributed to the education, I'm assuming, within the community. Is this an accurate statement?
Yeah, I'll say it's very accurate, and it goes back to that the purpose of the muratina in the muratina fruit is for you to grow old and to die when you want to go. Really, that was the purpose in that blessing that came in, so that you could grow old, and you might be 120, but you're still sharp as a whistle and you still have great memory. I remember my great grandmother. She passed away when she was 120, and she was sharp until...
Yeah, so may you enjoy the sweetness of every stage of your life, including this last stage of Keheti.
The entrances and exits of life are very key to who we are. Because if you have the beauty of choice in it, it's even held in higher regard. So like when an infant decides to be born, that is held in high regard because the spirit decided that it was going to join us. So it's a celebration, right? At the end of life, when you have decided, meaning that you have lived your whole life and now you are 130 and you decide to leave, that life is celebrated and that death is celebrated. How death occurs in between those looks different, right? Because then if you have somebody who passed away, let's say when they were in their 20s, right? The assumption is that this person they decided that they were going to become a full member of society, right? Meaning they were circumcised, they went through all that, but something happened, and now they're no longer here. So it's considered like a premature death, right? That is a death of sorrow. You see where I'm going with it? But then when you're 150, that's a death of joy. The person left in a way that was good for them, you know?
King'ori, I love
Absolutely.
that. What do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I do want to tell you a little bit about both Matura Guru and Keheti. These two are no longer sexually active. And it's actually a prerequisite for being considered either. So for Matura Guru, it is a ritual that takes place within the structure of the Keama. So we can't really talk about that. But he is very well understood in the community as a priest. This is the natural priest. This is the person who, on behalf of the entire community, does the magogona, goes and does a sacrifice under that tree, goes and offers those prayers in a communal sense. So this is the community priest. This is an individual who no longer has any sexual desires and is not acting that way. And I tend to think that this is the knowledge that, faiths like the Catholic Church knew that existed naturally within a community like the Agîkûyû. That our priest, our community priest, was celibate. But he wasn't celibate because, they're not supposed to or not allowed to. They would be doing it because naturally they're now celibate. They're not practicing and no longer entertaining in this like Ciku said, in this reproductive part of their lives. In fact, it's now inactive, completely turned off. And this is the same thing with the Keheti. And something happens because of that, because that's completely switched off. You start to see the same thing you were seeing in the first stage of life, where gender roles start to merge. And a Keheti can now actually go into the Council of Elders and sit with the men and deliberate and be heard and actually even had their own staff of leadership. And you're seeing with the Mugikuyu Matura group, whenever there are women-related ceremonies, like one that is very sacred that used to happen whenever, and this would seen as a big problem, whenever a fire would go out in a woman's kitchen, for example. If the fire went out, that was seen as a no-no. They were seen as something that shouldn't happen. And so for that fire to be restarted, it was actually such a gentleman. This man would be the one to be called and to start that fire. And, because they're not bringing any male energy into that, yet it seems like it's the right thing for someone to do that, right? And they're a priest, right? Remember that. This is the person everyone sees as closest to the ancestors, closest to God, in a better position to speak on their behalf. So this was a very, very, very key stage of life for both the Keheti and the Mugikuyu Matura group. This woman in her age was really someone very serious, someone everyone wanted to listen to every single word. She was very bold. Right. She could go anywhere. She could enter anywhere. She could. She was even allowed to have her firewood be sacred trees. She could use sacred trees for her firewood. This is the only. Not even the Mugikuyu Matura group could do this. Only the Keheti was allowed to. She had too many. She had a lot of exceptions. Yeah. And then the Mugikuyu on the same side, something similar. They had many exceptions in society. So, at every stage, it looks like you had one more thing to look forward to. Yeah. And for the Keheti and the Matura group, they were looking forward to becoming ancestors. They were not afraid of death. Yes. They were not thinking that this is going to be a painful experience or anything like that. And that's why they would usually say, hey, I'm sick. Just go put me out over there and let me just end my days in peace. They were not afraid. In contrast, if you go to any, if you are, we see this in movies, but I'm sure it's true in reality. Whenever someone of Western origin has been told you're about to die, or you're sick with this thing and you have 2 days, or something like that, or they panic. Mm-hmm. It's full-blown depression, what have you. Whatever. Mugikuyu in general wasn't that way. Mugikuyu in general was someone who knew where they're going.
They knew.
And so, they knew where they're going. They knew they were going to be ancestors. They embraced that. They may not be ready, but they were not afraid of what, there's no hell to go where you're going to be toasted. And plus, if you lived your life in an upright way, you were looking forward to becoming an ancestor and continuing to interact with your family and defending them from that other realm. So I think, all these stages were powerful, important, and they balanced out an individual's life for anyone who was lucky enough to go through all of them.
I think that's just so beautiful. And in fact, sometimes people misunderstand the way we handled death, in terms of, for example, somebody was left outside to pass, right? And like somebody said before, there was a choice. They knew they were ready, right? And death was not the end of who you are like it is in this, the way we think of it today. It was simply moving on to the next stage of your life, right? And I use that word life very loosely. You are moving on to the stage of your life. And I read somewhere that the Agîkûyû celebrated was more a community about life and celebration of the living versus one that was focused on death, right? As we have learned a lot in our westernized education, where in religion it's very focused on death, right? Versus for us, it was about life and making life the best that it could be. So I think these stages are very beautiful. So Waiyaki, any other final thoughts before we close this podcast?
No, I think we've talked exhaustively, and we could continue talking.
Yeah.
If we bring up new topics. I think we've had a really good conversation, and I do want to thank you guys for bringing in all this knowledge that you have to expound on a podcast we already talked about. This was a really good conversation.
I agree. Thank you so much for bringing so much richness and depth into this conversation, Ciku and King'ori. I can tell you that I am leaving this feeling so profoundly proud of who I am and so profoundly proud of my history and my heritage. Again, this is continuous affirmation that our ancestors were deep, they were thoughtful, they were brilliant. And don't let anybody tell you any different. And you guys have helped bring this to light. Thank you as well, Waiyaki, with your contributions. This has been so powerful. And at this point, are we going to talk about what the next podcast will be about, or are we just going to leave that in the air and let it transform itself, Waiyaki?
That's a good question, Njeri. I think we had intended to close at 10 episodes, and the reason for it was Keda Moyeru,
right?
Which we discussed in the first episode
the
of the
origin
podcast.
Story.
Right. So, but I think we'll close the season with an extra episode, and we'll keep it a surprise.
I love that. It's going to be so delicious. So you guys tune in because this one's going to be good. Thank you so much, Waiyaki.
Thank you, Njeri.
Thank you for listening and being present here with us today. We are grateful. You can find Matire Gemi on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to follow us. Our website is matire-gemi at simplecast.com. And this podcast was produced by Waiyaki Shaga and Njeri Wadiho with sound design by Njengan Gigs. Thanks again. And please share this widely.